There we go. Actually, okay, go. No, Rob was at the end. I think go forward a few times, and I'll keep going, keep going, keep going. Oh, no, there we go. There we go. Go back up. Excellent. Oh, one more. Yeah. There we go.
Okay, Darren, Glenn is here now.
Here's the real
Here's the
comment.
man.
Just think of that.
It looks like you're totally.
Yeah, no, I got a few photos that we can show off, so that's good. There's my visual edge. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Where are we at? Where are we at?
Oh,
Oh,
5-2.
5-2. And I lose track of time really fast when I'm doing this. So just
I'm going to be seated right in that corner.
wave at me and tell me to wrap it up if I'm going long or if I've lost track of time.
I will do
Okay.
that. And I will remind people that questions and answers at the end
At the
of your
end.
presentation, so we don't get people jumping around, whatever.
Excellent.
With a bunch of old people, it's amazing how it's like you're dealing, like in grade school. I used to teach, I was union rep, I used to do a lot of teaching. My job was adults, right? But sometimes it's side trip, it was just great.
I also brought a whole bunch of Guys in Disguise anniversary programs that we can kind of pass around and people can flip through them and pass them back and forth while I'm chatting too. I brought a whole bunch of them, so
So you don't care if some get
I would
taken
be
away.
okay if some. Yeah, I got lots. Because then some people can actually look up close. These are actually all photos from miles back. Sadly. So this is only like. Well, no, I just pulled out sort of cool stuff for today. Look, I got all these that we can pass around. Okay, you want me to do that? Okay. No, I mean, I can do it right now before the start. Oh, this. Hi. How's it going?
Really good.
Excellent.
I'm so happy you're here with us today.
Here, take one of these.
Oh, thank you.
You can flip through it while we're chatting. I'm gonna have someone pass them out. Hi. How are you doing? I'm gonna take one of these.
You're welcome. I'm excited.
Would you like one too? Do you want to pass some out? Do you want to pass some out to some people? I'm just gonna pass some out. There, good. Now everyone gets a good, nice, close look at the photos, so that's nice. Is this mine? It is. Excellent.
Oh, you took your thank you card. Good for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is great. I had no idea there would be this many people here. This is so awesome.
And there's another room.
I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. I haven't timed my presentation, so I'm just going to talk and tell stories until you tell me it's over.
I will give you, let's say, 10 to 1. It's sort of up to you. I can give you 10 to 1 or quarter to 1, whichever you like to signal, depending on your questions and answers.
Right.
And then I'll just wave my hand
Right.
like that, just like the Queen.
And if I get to the end of what I want to say, I might just open it up to questions early, if that's okay.
If you're at the end, yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, don't.
Okay, got it.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? No.
Hello, everybody.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Here,
Even-
do you want to speak in the mic? Here, let's do this.
Share the money. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for everyone who is here. And we will get going with this noon hour presentation, the last one of this week. Who I would like to introduce to you is Darren Hagen. Probably Darren doesn't need any introduction whatsoever. However, Darren Hagen will be taking you through a history of drag performance in Edmonton and notes the impact on the local and national cultural scene. Photo archives from the early years of the Imperial Sovereign Court of the Wild Rose, the Flashback Collection, and the Guides in Disguise archive will be shared and narrated. As a matter of fact, there's brochures being circulated from that, and Darren also has a lot of posters and material from throughout his career. I think many of you are familiar with Darren's plays and performances, particularly at the Fringe. So welcome, Darren, please.
Hello, everybody. So I pictured it being like me and about 15, 20 people in a small classroom. I had no idea it would be this big. Or I would have worn some jewels. That's all I can say. So where to begin with the drag history of Edmonton? I actually thought long and hard about where to start because I moved to Edmonton from Rocky Mountain House. Don't hold that against me. I grew up in a trailer court in Rocky Mountain House. I played the accordion. I had no dreams of becoming a female impersonator. That was the last thing on my mind, trust me. I moved to Edmonton to become a composer, and I thought that was going to be my mark in this world. And I moved to Edmonton and came to a club called Flashback, and on Halloween 1982, I saw my first drag show, and my life changed forever. Because for the first time in my life, everything that I was made sense. All the stuff that didn't fit in the rest of the world, suddenly it made sense. So I saw my first drag show, Halloween 1982. By January, I remember the date. January 14th, 1983 was the first time I did full-on drag in Edmonton. So that's the birth of Gloria Hull, which is my drag character. And I became part of the drag community in Edmonton. I spent about 10 years working at the club Flashback. And in that time, I learned the craft of drag, and we decided to go pro. And ever since then, I've been creating drag material, drag comedy, drag theater, queer history stuff. It set my career off as a writer, and it was a really exciting thing. But I was always interested in the drag queens that came before me. So when I was 18 years old and I moved to Edmonton and started hanging out at Flashback, one of the first people I met was this okay. Well, this is what's hilarious. I'm older than he was then. At the time, 50 seems so old. Now that I'm 53, it doesn't. So, but he was this Indian princess that we held in very high regard. This First Nations Indigenous drag queen named Millicent. Millie, we called her. And she had the proud distinction of being the only drag queen in Edmonton that reigned as Empress 1 and Miss Flashback 1. She was Empress and Miss Flashback at the same time. And she was obsessed with drag history. In fact, when she met you, after you won a crown like Miss Flashback, she would say, "What number are you?" And you go, "I'm number 9, Millie." And she'd go, "I'm number 1. Anyway, when I stepped down as Miss Flashback, Millie decided, I did a number called This Is My Life with a big bowl of Life cereal. I was spitting cereal all over the place in a beautiful beaded gown. And the crowd was cheering, and Millie came up, and it was this beautiful moment of the passing of the guard, the first Miss Flashback, giving a kiss on the cheek to the newest Miss Flashback. And just as I took my kiss, then she picked up the punch bowl full of milk and cereal and dumped it over my head. It's on video. It's on video. I don't have that video with me today, but that's another show. We'll do that sometime. But I became very, I never planned to be a drag queen. And once I was in that world, it became such an important part of my life and such an important part of my expression, self-expression. And it became the basis of almost all of my creative output. So I thought I would give you a little history on the history that I stepped into when I was 18 years old in 1982. First of all, you've all heard of the Imperial Sovereign Court of the Wild Rose because you just heard about it and you laughed about it, which was kind of interesting. What was so funny about that? Just the title? So let me tell you about the court system. I don't know if everybody realizes this or not, but Edmonton has an empress and an emperor. Did you know that? Okay, so we are on our 41st, I think 40th or 41st Empress. So for the last 40 years, the queer community in Edmonton has been electing a drag queen head of state. Millie Millicent, the House of Millicent, all the houses of Edmonton are called the House of Millicent. And she was the very first Empress, and it might, we were part of a North American system. So let me tell you about the court system first. I had to Wikipedia this because I didn't know this stuff before I came today. So the court system, which is basically, we call it a monarchist society. So basically, the community elects a head of state. That head of state, which is a drag queen, and hopefully she's fabulous, she's in charge for an entire year, and in that year she becomes an ambassador for her city, and she goes to visit other cities and raise awareness of her own community, and also raises money for gay charities and fundraisers and stuff like that. So it's a non-profit monarchist society, and the way they raise money and raise awareness is through drag performance. So all the way back in 1965. Are you gonna move me? Oh, okay. I thought I was standing in the wrong place or something. In 1965, in San Francisco, there was a drag queen named Mama Jose, also known as the Widow Norton. She started this Imperial Sovereign Court of the Wild Rose in 1965. I was 1 year old at the time. And what happened was a few years before that, like a decade or two before that, there was a young man born in Cooking Lake, just outside of Edmonton. He didn't grow up in Edmonton. He was actually a BC resident with his family, but his family they were on a camping trip, and his mother went into labor and she gave birth to twins. One of those twins was named Ted North. Now, Ted North became a drag queen and a queer activist. And what happened was, when he moved to Vancouver, he started to actually try to raise awareness of how gay people were being treated by the police in Vancouver in the 1950s. And because he was living in Vancouver, it was a hop, skip, and a jump to go down to Seattle and then San Francisco. So during the time of Harvey Milk and people like that, and some of the early activists that were working in San Francisco, Ted North went down there and he saw this amazing thing that they had built called the court system. And he was sort of the first Canadian person to go, and by the way, Ted North, when he did his activism, he did it in drag. So if he was protesting about the treatment of gay people, one of the times that he first came to public prominence in Vancouver was he was in full drag on the steps of the Vancouver courthouse with a sign protesting. This is in the 1950s, early 1950s. And he got arrested, dressed in drag. And back then, female impersonation was actually against the law. And you always had to have 3 items of male clothing on you. So he would put a sock in each cup of his bra and wear his men's underwear, so that if it came right down to it, you say, yeah, I got my 3 pieces of guy clothing, right? Because it was against the law to impersonate a female. Anyway, he started traveling to San Francisco, partially to come out of the closet, partially to find his own journey. And he actually ran into a bunch of queer activists that were starting to really change things in San Francisco. One of the things he saw was the ball in San Francisco. Now, when the Empress steps down in a court system, she has a giant coronation ball. And the ball does 2 things. Well, it does a lot of things, trust me. But the main 2 purposes of the ball are to let the reigning Empress step down and to elect the brand new Empress that will then reign in your city for another year. So in 1965, or in the late 60s, Ted North went down to San Francisco, got to see this amazing thing that they created. And we're talking a huge ballroom with 400 people in it, and like half of them are in crowns and gowns, right, in high drag. And he was amazed by what they were doing in terms of outreach and how much positive energy and positive focus it brought to the community. It was kind of the community taking care of itself and raising money for its own causes. And he said to himself, this is a brilliant thing. We need this in Canada. Now, the court system started in San Francisco. A few years later, they started a new court in Seattle and a couple of other American cities. Ted North saw the ball in San Francisco and decided Vancouver needed a court. In fact, Canada needed the court system. So he came back to Canada and actually launched the Canadian the Canadian Sovereign Court system. Vancouver was the very first court. I don't think he was ever Empress of Vancouver. In fact, I don't think he was ever elected Empress. But what Ted North did that I totally admire and was kind of cheeky and awesome at the same time was he basically named himself the Empress of Canada. And he held that title until he died 2 years ago. He was the only ever. There's now a second Empress of Canada, but there all those years, when I was a drag queen, they go, oh yeah, no, she's the Empress of Canada, check her out. Wow. And he was this very unassuming small man, but he had big visions. Anyway, the court system in Vancouver started. A few years later, Edmonton was actually one of the second or third courts, I think, in Canada. And Edmonton started, the court system in Edmonton started in 1976. Now, before that happened, we had a club called Club 70. Have you guys all heard of Club 70? Club 70 was the first gay bar in Edmonton. Club 70 was actually established in 1969, shortly after Pierre Trudeau did his "The State Has No Place in the Bedrooms of the Nation" speech and decriminalized homosexuality. And some enterprising queer people in Edmonton decided that they would start a club. And they called it Club 70, even though it was 1969, because they thought Club 69 sounded too cheeky. That's the truth. And so they called it Club 70. They were forward thinking, right? It was on 101st Street, just north of where the Baccarat Casino is now. There's a little tiny dingy club called Milla's Pub. Do you know the one I'm talking about? Anyway, it's just falling apart. But if you look on the north end, there's actually a little green door or red door, and it went downstairs to the basement. Apparently, that location only lasted for about 2 weekends because the landlord, the owner of the building, found out who had moved in downstairs, a gay bar, and kicked them out, seized all their equipment, seized all the booze, and that was the first time that the queer community fought the establishment and won and got all of their equipment back. They moved into the location that was eventually known as Boots and Saddles on 106th Street, which you might be familiar with. If I can step back before that a little bit, though, I mentioned Pierre Trudeau and the decriminalization of homosexuality. The way that came to Pierre Trudeau's attention when he was Justice Minister was a drag queen activist from Vancouver that started a grassroots letter writing campaign to all the MPs in Canada to protest the treatment of queer people in Canada. And actually, Ted North, the Empress of Canada, got the attention of Pierre Elliott Trudeau and some of his contemporaries, and that's what brought it. It was a Calgarian named Edward Clifford. Sorry, I forgot his first name. Sorry, I think it's Clifford is his last name. He was actually charged with homosexuality, with obscene behavior. And in 1961, they changed the laws in Canada so that if you wouldn't renounce your homosexuality, you were declared a dangerous offender. So just for the simple act of consensual gay sex, this man was in prison for life. And so when Ted North heard about this, he decided he was tired of protesting small moments in Vancouver and decided it was time for a national kind of protest. And he actually started to organize a grassroots letter writing campaign that ended up in the decriminalization of homosexuality through the legal system and the parliamentary system in Canada. And he actually got to meet Pierre Trudeau several times. He said he was a handsome bastard. That's a direct quote. I heard it in an interview that I transcribed. And I thought, no, sexy bastard was the phrase he used actually. And they met a few times in their journey towards that decriminalization moment. And in fact, when the decriminalization was finally announced, Pierre Elliott Trudeau phoned up Ted North and said, "Hello, my Empress, and congratulations." So we're talking royalty here, kids. We're talking total royalty. So anyway, Ted North starts the court system in Canada in 1971, I believe it was. By 1976, there was this idea that, okay, so John Reid was the owner of a club that was eventually going to be called Flashback. But before Flashback opened, he was coming out. He was a young man. He'd been to other places in North America where there was like discos and dancing. And then he came to Edmonton and he tried to get into the gay bar, which was Club 70. Which before it was Boots and Saddles, and he couldn't get in because it was a private club and you had to prove that you were gay to get in. And it's like, how do you prove that at the front door of a gay bar? Well, I can think of a few ways, but we won't go there. Anyway, he was shocked that as a gay man who wanted to experience this gay life, he was not allowed in. Also, Club 70 was for gay people only, so if you were a straight person who had gay friends, you were not welcome in the bar. And it was something that they had to do, they thought they had to do at the time, to create a safe space for queer people. When John Reid, okay, so John Reid used to tell me, there used to be drag shows at Club 70. Now, they didn't have a sound system, they only had a jukebox. And if you didn't get there in the middle of the afternoon before all the lesbians got there, the lesbians would fill the jukebox with quarters and play country music all night. So the gay men were not happy about that because they wanted to dance to Donna Summer and Diana Ross. But they would actually use this jukebox for the drag shows, so that was their sound system. And one of the drag queens her name was Millie that I told you about. Anyway, Millie and John Reid decided Edmonton needs a dance club. And so John Reed also wanted to open up a club where it didn't matter if you were gay or not, that if you were a gay supportive person, that you would be welcome and start to create a larger family. So in 1976, he opened up Flashback. So Flashback became kind of the drag bar in town. It had a stage, it had a sound system, it had a spotlight, it had everything that drag. John believed in drag and drag performance, and he also knew the draw of drag and how many people it would draw to the bar. And so he actually always supplied beautiful facilities like a decent dance floor and a good sound system and a dressing room. As a drag queen at Flashback, I always had a glamorous dressing room. Some theaters in Edmonton don't have that, right? So anyway, 1976, let me go back to my notes here. In 1976, the court system was established at the same time Flashback was established, because Millie had heard of this court system and she wanted to be Empress of Edmonton, come hell or high water. And not only that, but once John Reed opened up a club called Flashback, she said, well, we can also start another pageant. So you can run for Empress or you could run for Miss Flashback. And so Millie ran for both and won, and is the only person to have ever been both at the same time. So the Flashback opened in 1976. It was on 119th Street and Jasper, underneath where it's now Marg's Upholstery, underneath Normand's in the basement. That's the very first Flashback. It was a small room. It quickly became way too successful, and they had to start thinking about finding a new location. So they found a new location on the Warehouse District, where Neon Alley is right now, 104th Street in the Warehouse District. But just before they managed to open up on 104th Street, another enterprising businessman named Dow Hicks opened up, and Jim Schaefer opened up the Roost right across the street. So the Roost actually opened up first on 104th Street, and Flashback was cranky, because that was their big plan, was moved to 104th Street. So Flashback opened across the street, thus setting off decades of rivalry between the Roost and Flashback, like the Hatfields and the McCoys. Now, the drag queens all knew that if you want an audience for your drag show, ultimately, you need the entire community. And a city the size of Edmonton with 2 bars, right? Only one bar was ever busy at a time. Let's just put it that way. So on a Friday night, you would go to the Roost, and on a Saturday night, you would go to Flashback. And if you had a drag show and there was nobody there and you were ready to go on stage, all the girls would get their heels and their fur coats on and walk across 104th Street and go to the Roost and go, hey, we're doing a show across the street. And all the people would come over, buy a drink, watch the show, and leave, right? So you could always guarantee that you had an audience. So the very first Empress, of course, was Millie. And the very first Miss Flashback. The next Emperor and Empress of Edmonton were Chatty Cathy Jackson, who was a school teacher who did drag, and she had the Barbra Streisand profile. She was famous for doing funny girl movies for Barbra Streisand's movies. And John Reed was the Emperor. And John Reed, of course, was the man that opened up Flashback. Now, their coronation ball, was held at the Hotel McDonald. They were thinking big, right? And they decided that as one of the rituals, and have you ever been to a coronation ball? Basically, you've got 2 thrones at the front of the stage. It's like going to visit Queen Elizabeth. You get announced with your titles, you walk in, you present a gift to the reigning Emperor and Empress. If you have a command performance, you might do a drag number for Her Highness. And then you bow and you get your cheers, you kiss the Emperor and Empress, and you leave. But there's a lot of walking in regally to applause with spotlights. And they decided that wouldn't it be fabulous if every time someone walked in, that we have a beautiful young drag queen throwing rose petals in front of them, right? Well, by the end of the ball, what they realized was the rose petals were getting crushed into the parquet floor of the ballroom. And the entire profit from the ball that year was spent refinishing the floor of the Hotel McDonald. So we're up now. So anyway, so we get to Empress 3. Her name was Nikki. Empress 4 was Trixie. Empress 5 was named Rayette, and then Empress 6 was named Lindy Starr. Lindy Starr, his real name was Ross Hahn. Lindy Starr was the one who opened up Swizzle Stick Salon on White Avenue, which has since expanded to a Calgary location and is one of the the ultimate supreme salons in Edmonton. So he was a very good businessman. After him, and his emperor was Mrs. K and Sam. Now Mrs. K was studying to be a nutritionist and a dietitian, which is what he does on the West Coast now. He took a shine to me. He thought we had a lot of fun together. And while he was Empress, he put me in my first drag show. Now this is how you get into your first drag show. A song comes on that you love so much that you have to get up on the speaker and dance like a go-go girl because it's just in you, right? And so It's Raining Men was a brand new song. That's how long ago this was. It's Raining Men. I loved that song so much. I don't know why. I just loved it. It made me so happy. And so I was up on the speaker doing all the moves and lip syncing, and I knew every word and I had it all choreographed and the whole thing. I wasn't in drag. I had never done drag at this point. I just loved disco music. And Mrs. K actually watched me dance on the speaker and decided, that boy needs to get put in a dress. So he talked me into it. Now, the first show I ever did was January 14th, 1983. It was called Black and White Dreams. It was a court show. Back in those days, there was a difference between the court queens and the flashback queens. Because even though we're all the same community, and sometimes people go back and forth, the flashback queens were about shows. The court queens were about the politics of representing your city and raising money. So there was a very different tone. However, Mrs. K was a creative person, and so was Lindy Starr, who had come before him. And so they decided they would do a Black and White Dreams show. Now, this is hard to say in this present day of political correctness, but we were doing Dreamgirls, so we did black drag. I know! It was a simpler time, you guys. So there are pictures of me in my first time in real drag. I will never share them in public, though, because I'll get shamed on social media. But the thing about being in black drag is you're not allowed to touch your face at all because the paint comes off. And by the end of the night, I had a big white stripe down my nose because I couldn't keep my hands off my face. I thought I looked beautiful, and I was beautiful. I remember actually shopping for my first pair of high heels at Tall Crest Shoes in Edmonton Center. Tall girl shoes, yeah. That's a trip in itself, let me tell you. I was terrified. I remember actually the music starting, It's Raining Men, the dun, dun, and I had my back to the audience, and my legs were just vibrating because I thought, oh my God, the second I turn around, my life has changed forever, and it did. Somehow I got through that show. We had a great time and a big party afterwards, and I was completely bitten by the bug, and I wanted a crown. Damn it, I wanted a crown. Because that's the only way you're anything in the drag world is you get a crown. So I decided. So in the meantime, I had met this wonderful man named Lulu LaRude, my drag mother. We were sisters. We were girls. We were not boyfriend material. We were girlfriend material. Lulu was only a few months older than me, but she was decades ahead of me in experience. And she had actually worked the streets in drag as a prostitute, as a sex worker, but was trying to go legit and started to perform. And the two of us started to perform together. So around this same time, one of Lulu's best friends, this was one of the flashback queens, Millie, gave birth to a whole group of queens that were a little wilder than the Empresses. The Miss Flashbacks, they were a beautiful group of queens that were intensely performative, really talented, and really out to shock people. And Miss Flashback 7, his name was Trash, Terry Robinson. And Trash was wild because he was the first person to actually take drag out of the bar and walk down Jasper Avenue with it. Like on Halloween, Trash would get in drag and go to Earl's. Not Flashback. Because I would say, why would you go to Earl's? Halloween is the one night when I can go out dressed like this and no one thinks I'm a freak. He was also short, so sometimes he could be mistaken for a real girl, unlike me, who is Broadzilla, right? And anyway, Trash was so notorious in Edmonton that when he was Miss Flashback, Wayne Krause, who was the page 6 columnist in the Edmonton Sun, Wayne Krause would write about Trash all the time. And that's when the Miss Flashbacks and the drag scene started to actually make its way into the media. So for instance, David Hennessy, who was Mr. Flashback, and who ended up becoming general manager at some of the theaters in town before he moved out of town, he decided that he was going to choreograph. He was the theater guy. Trash was not a theater guy. Trash was just a wild queen. But David decided he was going to choreograph the Dead Celebrities Halloween show, which is the very first drag show I ever saw. Trash wanted to be the star of the show because he was the reigning Miss Flashback. David Hennessy decided to pull rank, and he gave someone else the role of Marilyn Monroe to die in the last scene. Trash resigned as Miss Flashback in a huff, and it made the local paper. That's how I found out that Trash had resigned as Miss Flashback. Oh, it was a huge scandal. It was a huge scandal. But it was the first time that sort of the underground world started to sort of bubble up and percolate into sort of the mainstream media, and I thought that was kind of exciting. So then we went to Mrs. K and Sam. Lulu decided to run for Empress that year after Mrs. K. Lulu was still, we were 19 or 20, she was still way too young and way too raw and way too controversial because to be Empress, you sort of got to kiss ass a bit, right? It's a diplomacy ambassador position. And as you can tell from my potty mouth, I'm not the most diplomatic person in the world. And neither was Lulu. We used to get in a lot of trouble. In fact, I remember one night we actually got in a huge fight with Empress 2, Chatty, at a new club called Stepping Out that had opened up. And we accused someone of stealing our bag of drugs, and we were positive that they had stolen our bag of weed. And we accused them of doing it, and Chatty told me to shut up and threw a cup of coffee in my face, and I punched her, and the next thing you know, I was smashing her up against a wall, and then the bouncers broke us up and threw us all out, and the next day it was this huge scandal all over town because I was Lulu's campaign manager, and I had just beat up one of the old empresses. And so we were in trouble, we knew it, we thought, oh, well, she's never gonna win this time. And the next day we were actually walking back to stepping out because Trash Worked in the Kitchen would always feed us for free without taking any money from us, and we needed that free food because we were poor. And we were walking down the street saying, oh man, I can't believe we lost that bag of weed. And then Lulu went, wait a minute. And we went over to where we had sat just before we went to visit Trash the day before the entire day started, and we found the bag of weed sitting on the pavement right where we had sat and rolled the joint. So anyway, okay, enough of mine. So none of that had to happen. We never told anybody for years. So anyway, so Lulu lost the first time she ran for Empress. It was sad, but it was a good thing because by the time the next year came around, Lulu was ready to run for Empress, and she ran and won. Right after Lulu ran for Empress, I ran for Miss Flashback and won. So the 9th year of the Imperial House of Millicent was Lulu LaRue as Empress 9, me as her Imperial Crown Princess 9, that's the second in line to the throne, which means every time Lulu is late for a show, I have to take over. And I also became Miss Flashback 9. And then that same year, Lulu was named Entertainer of the Year. And suddenly, we had all the crowns in Edmonton between the two of us, and we took over. And that was the beginning of the reign of Gloria Hull. A few years later, we started Guys in the Sky. Okay, so this picture here, this is Lulu. When Lulu stepped down as Empress, this picture was taken at her ball. It was a royal wedding, that was the theme. So that's Lulu dressed as the bride, and that's me dressed as the bridesmaid. And if you can see, I've got a Walkman stuck in my Puerto Rican prom dress, because I was just dancing to my own beat. I'm going to give you some more photos in a second, but I just want to make sure I don't miss any of this stuff. So in 1983, there was a drag troupe from Toronto called The Great Imposters. Rusty Ryan and The Great Imposters. If you've ever seen the movie Outrageous with Craig Russell, Rusty Ryan is in it. He was a very famous Toronto drag queen that formed a professional troupe that toured across Canada for decades until he passed away a few years back. We got to meet The Great Imposters. Were performing at the Winter Garden Room, which was at the Radisson on 105th Street. I think there's a Radisson now, isn't it? The hotel's changed so much, I can't never remember. Anyway, that was the first time we saw our first real legit drag show in a public sphere. Like straight people were buying tickets for this, right? And we decided that had to be us. So Rusty Ryan convinced us that we should start our own troupe. So Lulu and I started a troupe called First Impressions. We did a couple of professional shows. Our very first professional gig was with Myrna Green. How am I doing for time? I want to make sure I get through. Myrna Green was a strip agent in town. She actually ran a company called Green's Artist, and their job was to send exotic dancers out to taverns and bars all over Alberta. And she made a very good living doing it. She had a roster of about 40 or 50 exotic dancers. For some reason, one day she approached me and Lulu, and this is like early in our career, and she said, you know, I've been thinking that it's time for the bars to see something different. So we thought we would try taking a drag show to one of these bars. And we went, oh, that sounds fabulous. How much will we get paid? We'll be fabulous. And so we got paid about $100 each, I think. And the next thing you know, we're in drag being driven out to Gibbons, Alberta. Have you ever been to Gibbons? There's like one Main Street and there's a tavern on Main Street. In that tavern is where I did my very first professional drag gig. So we walked in and all the rig guys were there waiting for the peelers to show up. And it was us instead. So hilariously, the seniors that were there last night, they loved us. The rednecks, not so much, but they came around because Lulu knew how to handle a tough crowd. Anyway, so that was First Impressions. A few years later, this is after Lulu and I had both given away our crowns. Lulu and I had lived together for a while. Then our relationship started to fall apart because we were very competitive. We were both kind of the talk queens in town. And really, even when she moved across the country, our egos met in Thunder Bay somewhere, right? We had pretty big egos. So eventually, I wouldn't call it a falling out. Let's just say we drifted apart, even within Edmonton. And in 1987, a friend of my husband's came up to us and said, have you ever heard of this thing on White Avenue? It's called The Fringe. It's really hot. You guys should check it out. And of course, we were downtown, gay bar homos. We never went to the South Side. Like, who does that? That was when White Avenue sucked, right? So anyway, we decided, without ever having been to the Fringe, that we were going to sign up and do our first Fringe show. So in 1987, we did our very first Fringe show. I'm going to scroll you through some pictures now before I get confused and get too far ahead in history. Oops. Left click or right? There we go. This is me and Lulu's very first photo shoot. This is taken at Flashback in the back room by the Hot Tracks record store by the back bar. So that's me in the back, and that's Lulu looking gorgeous with the wind in her wig. This is our very first drag show that we had a poster for. It's called The Wild Sorority Sisters from the Planet Playtex proudly present a salute to Trailer Court women. And if you can see in the picture, we actually got in drag, about 8 of us, and went out to trailer courts all around Edmonton and stood in their front yards and took photos. There's a whole series of photos from this. That was the poster. But my favorite shots were actually at the end of the day, once we got all the shots we needed, we went to the Alberta Legislature and got out of drag in front of thousands of people on a Saturday afternoon in the big fountain. Awesome times. This is me and my drag daughter, Tallulah. After I was Miss Flashback, I handpicked the next Miss Flashback. So Tallulah was an Italian boy from Northwest Territories who was half blind and epileptic, but she was a fabulous queen. So this is us doing Heart at the Roost, believe it or not. And then this is me in 1980. I think it's 88 or 89. That's my own hair, by the way. This is when I did the command performance for eventually the court system spread all the way to Toronto. So this is actually the second Toronto ball, and I did a command performance there. I'm going to flip through some of these. This is our very first drag show, 1987, Guys in the Skies. This was the picture that appeared in the journal. And this is the picture that almost broke us up as a troupe, because I think when the guys said, yeah, we'll do a drag show at the Fringe with you, they didn't realize that we were actually going to publicize it and put our pictures in the paper. And at one point they went, wait, is this going to be our real names under that? And I was like, well, yeah, you're professionals now. And they were freaked out, because this is how some of them got out into their family, was through the Guys in Disguise experience. Yeah, you don't think about these things. It's like, oh, let's do a show. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, here's me, another glamorous photo shoot with me and Lulu. Here's all of us in drag, 1987, very first Fringe ever. There's our program from that year, before and after shots. A few years later, we came back to the Fringe. This is on White Avenue. A few years later, we decided to start a BYOV, so we moved into the club called Rebar, which had actually been opened up by the Friends. After Flashback closed, the people that owned Flashback opened up Rebar on White Avenue, and it became a very mixed kind of alternative dance club on White Avenue. And we decided that we would start doing shows there, and for the next 20 years, we kind of ruled White Avenue during the Fringe. This is the kind of photo shoot we would love doing. These dresses cost $10, and they lasted till after the photo shoot. We washed them, and they all faded to nothing. But we got that picture, so that's Twiggy, Christopher Peterson, Mandy Camp, and Kim Knapp, all of whom ended up becoming empresses or princesses or Miss Flashbacks over the years. Here's 1991 when we did our first, okay, this is a funny shot actually, because that's Twiggy, Mandy, and Kimberly in a hot tub. Twiggy did the makeup for Mandy and Kimberly, and then she was running late and she went, I'm not doing makeup, and she put sunglasses on. The other girls were so mad at her. Oh, there's a good close-up shot. Look how fabulous they are. See, Twiggy doesn't have any eye makeup on in that shot. She's sneaky, that one. Then the next year we made them decide, we said, wear black and white. We're going on a special location shoot. So we took them to a dairy farm up by Spruce Grove. Yeah, I still don't know what the reasoning was behind that. This is my friend Christopher Peterson. How many of you have seen the movie Rat Race with Whoopi Goldberg? Okay, so the group of Lucille Ball impersonators, where one of them is a woman, that's my friend Christopher Peterson. And so what we did was, when we brought Guys in Disguise back in 1991, we decided it would be a traditional cabaret of drag, but we knew that we needed that sort of extra little something. So we brought in my friend Christopher Peterson, who was Empress of Vancouver at the same time that Lulu was Empress of Edmonton. They were actually the two youngest empresses in Canada at that time. Actually, they would have been the two only empresses in Canada at that time, to be fair. Anyway, Christopher had become this world-famous female impersonator in the meantime. So we brought him back to Edmonton. He's done many Fringes with us. In fact, he'll be doing the Fringe with us this summer again, actually. So this is one of his impersonations. He does a great Lucille Ball. And when he did Lucille Ball that year, front page of the Journal. It was the first time we'd ever had front page coverage. Okay, here's my photo shoot for, this is from the photo shoot that we used for the book cover when my book came out. This is a serious theater piece that I did. Eventually, when the gay bar closed down, when Flashback closed down, I gave up my drag bar career, and I started to move back into music for theater, which is what I had decided I was moving up to here in the first time. I kind of put drag behind me for a while, and after a few years of working in theater, I went, oh my God, the girls in these shows have such a great time, and they get to wear such great clothes. I wish that was me. Wait a minute. And so I started to look for drag plays, because I knew that theater was a great place for drag performance and drag characters, and I started to find them. And that's where I started to actually do drag in theater. There we go, that's all. This is actually, these are taken in the Boiler Room, the Boiler Lounge on 103rd Street on Boardwalk. Then, of course, if you're a drag queen, you always have some photo student at the Grand PQ and say, I'm doing a photo essay on people getting in drag. Would you come and do some photos for me? So we always say yes as long as we get the photos. So these are some of the photos from that shoot. Here we go. Oops, I missed. There we go. Oh, my mermaid tail. Okay, so this mermaid tail kind of made me famous. In 1987, when we did my very first Fringe, we were in the Fringe parade, and I wore my mermaid tail, and it got us on to 3 channels on the 6 o'clock news. And my grandma phoned me up the next day and went, were you dressed in a woman's bathing suit on the Fringe parade yesterday? She wouldn't have known it was me, except as I went by the camera, I went, hey, how's it going? And she recognized my voice. So that's how I got outed to my grandma. Now, this mermaid tail, I got after I slept with a guy. I didn't sleep with him to get the mermaid tail, more like I slept with him and then he gave me a mermaid tail. I don't quite know how that worked. But it's gotten me in a lot of trouble because we use it in the Fringe, but I've also used it in a dunk tank where I almost drowned once. And then we did a photo shoot for the Edmonton Queen where I was actually in a dinghy playing the accordion in my mermaid outfit. And we were trying to get footage of me getting arrested by or harassed by security guards. And we were out in the fountain and floating around, and it was just harder than you think because you have to keep paddling to keep facing the camera because you're always spinning around. And we were out there for like half an hour. We got lots of pictures, and finally there was security guards started walking towards us. And we said, okay, here, start taking pictures because he's going to give us shit and try and get us out of here. And the guy came up and went, excuse me, ma'am, but the fountains are about to turn on and I don't want you to get your accordion wet. There's me and Christopher doing a photo shoot for TV, Transvestite Television, our first play that we wrote. This is actually, believe it or not, up against a wall of TV, a bank of TVs at London Drugs. So we got very public over the years. There's the poster for TV. I'm going to flip through these. This is kind of the guys in disguise part of the show here. Oh, there's the photo shoot in the fountain at the City Hall. Then I got on the cover of View Weekly. Oh, so this photo of me in the pink dress. My very first play was inspired by eulogies that I'd written for queens that had passed away from AIDS through the 90s. And I got a chance to write a play, and we needed a title. And the Edmonton Queen, the riverboat, was suddenly this huge. It was always in the news, and it was always bad news. Edmonton Queen, the river's too shallow. Edmonton Queen, up on blocks. Edmonton Queen will never sail. So we decided that my play would be called The Edmonton Queen, not a riverboat story. We decided, when I did my very first reading of the Edmonton Queen, the headline of the paper that day was, Edmonton Queen finally set sail. I'm not kidding. It was awesome. And so we decided that we would do a photo shoot on the Edmonton Queen. So I got in drag, my camera guy showed up, we phoned the Edmonton Queen, and they wouldn't answer the phone. We had to cancel the photo shoot. So I ended up going to the farmer's market and having my picture taken with some Hutterites and some broccoli. And this shot. True story. Oh, there's a beautiful color shot of the fountain. More of the same shot. I'm going to flip through some of these. These are just glamour shots from the Edmonton Queen. Then, because we had already gone to a trailer court to do a photo shoot, we decided, let's go to a trailer court to do my second show. So my second play is called Tornado Maiden, a salute to trailer court women, which is all about my mom. So that's me kind of playing my mom. And we literally, this trailer court is now gone. It's now one of those used storage places. It was right where Manning Freeway meets that, that overpass. And it was a little tiny old rundown trailer court. We just literally drove in. I jumped out of the car. We started taking pictures. And if you look in some of the pictures, you can see people peeking out their windows at us. It's always easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, right? So we've done that show a few times, as you can see. And there's a picture of me actually in the show. There's pictures of the show itself. Oh, there's a good long shot of the trailer court. It's a good shot. Then we did something called Under the O Murder, which is a murder drag queen bingo murder mystery. Nothing much to say about that except it was absolutely chaos. Oh, it got my favorite review ever from Liz Nichols of the Journal, which was, the closing line was, if you're expecting a plot summary, you're under the N nuts. There's us looking absolutely glamorous. Okay, then the next year we decided to do a play. Chris Craddock and I wrote a play about a transsexual private eye, the private dick with a difference. We called it Tranny Get Your Gun. So that's the photo shoot from Tranny Get Your Gun. The great thing about having so many photos taken is, like, for the years where I looked really awesome, I have proof. I have proof that I had a 30-inch waist at one time. There we are on the cover of the Weekend Express of the Edmonton Sun. So this is what always amazed me was we were kind of this two-bit troupe out of nowhere. Didn't really know what we were doing, what the heck we were doing, but somehow the photos kept getting us on covers of magazines, and the media loved it. Even to this day, of course, if there's a pride parade, the media goes right for the drag queen, right? So this is in a back alley on White Avenue. Check out those legs. Then we did a show called Men Are Stupid, Women Are Crazy, where we took Mark Meir and put him in drag as a woman, and we took Andrea House and put her in drag as her redneck husband. So that's Andrea House's bum. And there's Chris Craddock as cameraman. And then we did a play called Pile Driver. Now, Pile Driver, when I was working at Flashback, we had a bouncer who used to be a Stampede wrestler. He actually toured the country. He wrestled in Madison Square Garden. And him and all of his other wrestling buddies, and he was a big guy, Harvey Jones his name was, and they used to literally tour around from town to town with their boyfriends, and then get out of the bus, go into the arena, and beat the crap out of each other for a bunch of straight guys. So we've always decided that wrestling is actually homoerotica for homophobes. So once he passed away from AIDS, he actually, my husband was his caregiver, and he gave us all his archives. So I got all these beautiful programs of his wrestling career, and like his cape and his boots, and I'm actually wearing his boots in that shot right now. So we decided to write a play based on the story of his life, inspired by the story of his life, called Pile Driver, which is the first time I did the Winnipeg Fringe. That's Wes Borg and Joe Bird on stage with us. So it was Guys in Disguise versus Three Dead Trolls in a Baggie. There we go. There's me trying to look butch. Okay, so if you're a big Nelly drag queen, don't write a role for yourself where you have to play a straight guy, because it's no fun. Because I had to like quell every one of my natural performance urges. Some of these quickly here. Lots of wrestling shots. There's the poster. Oh, then we did a sequel to Tranny Get Your Gun called Little Orphan Tranny. It was a religious thriller. And then we did a remount of the Edmonton Queen. This is one of my very favorite photo shoots. This dress weighs about 45 pounds. It's solid glass. I also wore this dress on the Ampias when Wes Borg and I did a little sketch on how not to accept an Ampia award, which was really funny. Then we did a prequel to the Tranny series called Tranny at Green Gables. And that's me sitting on the LRT railroad track in Grandin. There's the bunch of us. Oh, and this is the first time we ever hired a young man named Trevor Schmidt in a pink dress. So Trevor Schmidt is going to become very important in the next few pictures here. So this, I love that picture so much. Okay. Then we did a Michel Tremblay play called La Duchesse de Langeais. Michel Tremblay, of course, is a Montreal playwright who wrote many classic Canadian plays, including 3 that feature drag characters and drag queens that he knew in Montreal. This is sort of the precursor to Hosanna, which was his greatest play. There's the photo shoot for that. Oh, and just so you know, in the background is Lake Winnipeg. We actually drove all the way to Grand Beach in Lake Winnipeg and filmed the water so that we can have water in the background on stage. Then Trevor Schmidt and I decided to do a play called Bitch Slap, where we played Joan Crawford and Betty Davis. This was the first play that like literally launched us out of sort of fringe of, not obscurity is not the wrong word. It really upped the ante though. And this is a play that I ended up touring to Calgary, Red Deer, Winnipeg. I think we did it in Regina, and ultimately we took it to the Orlando Fringe, where it got picked up by my friend Christopher Peterson, and he did it twice in Key West, Florida, and then it got picked up and got produced in West Hollywood. Some of the best reviews I've ever had in my life. So, and it was just my play wasn't turned into a miniseries, but if you watched FX the other day, you saw Feud. So I did it 12 years earlier, and I did it in 90 minutes instead of 8 hours. But yes, the Joan Crawford thing, we had so much fun doing that. Then we did a play called The Neo-Nazis, Hitler's Kick Line. This is actually based on the true story. This is a true story. One of my favorite things is to find drag stories that nobody knows about. And this is the true story of actually a bunch of Hitler SS guards that were forced to do drag for a Nazi propaganda musical. It's a true story. Oh yeah, there's the girls. This is fun. I love making straight boys do drag. And straight boys, when you put them in drag, they always go, oh, I'm so pretty. They love it. There's them getting in drag. There's Twiggy putting on his makeup. Sorry, didn't know that one was in there. See, straight boys love being in bras. I don't know what it is. Okay, then we did a show called Planes, Trams, and Automobiles with Dana Anderson. This one's opened in Winnipeg. It was about a cross-prairie tour. And then we did a show called The Coffee Dad, Chicken Mom, and the Fabulous Buddha Boy. This is actually a presentation. We started a company called Guy Undisguised, where we started producing one-man monologues by queer writers. So this is a writer named Nick Green. This show got swept the Fringe Sterling Awards. We won Outstanding Fringe New Work, Outstanding Fringe Production, and Best Fringe Performance by an Actor. And that's Trevor Schmidt, painted gold. At the same year, we did Two Queens and a Joker about Mary Queen of Scots and Elizabeth I. That's Trevor in the red fright wig. And then the next year, we also started producing drag shows again. So we call this Guys in Disguise Classic. So we just, in addition to the brand new plays, we also started producing old style drag shows again. So there we go. Our Roots Are Showing was the title of that one. Then we got together and decided we would play 3 senior citizen sisters from Dildo, Newfoundland. So this show's called Triple Platinum. It was a musical cabaret. Had a great time that year. Don't I look like Olympia Dukakis? I'm playing the accordion, of course. Or B. Arthur, I can't decide. Probably B. Arthur. There's the poster. Then with there, look at those girls. Those are 3 Edmonton queens that we put. That's Crystal and Chanelta and Binky from Edmonton. Then we did Dragula, a lesbian vampire play, which has been produced since in Minneapolis. And then here is where we revisited the Edmonton Queen. So what happened is I had put the Edmonton Queen to bed, and then ultimately, when the book came out in 1996. I sort of forgot to talk about this. The book came out in 1996, and then I did the version of the play at the Fringe the last time, and I kind of put it to bed. And then I got approached about doing a 10th anniversary edition of the book. So we added some material to the book, released it. The problem was, as I was doing it, my drag mama Lulu was passing away, and so I had to decide: do I try to rush the book so that she can read it before she dies, and then it's immediately, obviously, after she dies, or do we wait till she dies and then include that in the story? So that's what we ended up doing. And so I had kind of put the show behind me, getting fucked up just talking about it. And then the Fringe approached me and said, you should really do it one more time. It's like, no, I can't. I can't go through that ending. I can't go through that list of dead people over and over again. And he went, but it's important. And so I said, okay, well, if we're going to do it, we're going to do the best version that we've ever done. So that throne, just so you know, I could stand on the seat, and I'm over 7 feet tall in that wig and heels. I could stand on the seat of that throne, and the top of the throne is still way taller than me. It's about 17 feet tall. It's the best throne ever. So this is the last time I did the episode. Oh, look, see? Look how huge I am, and look how little I look. We had to get a special storage locker just for the throne. And there's the pictures of Trash, Lulu, Tallulah, and Aura. None of Trash is the only one who's still alive, but that's a beautiful picture of the set of the Edmonton Queen with the photos scattered all over the place. As you can see, I'm obsessive about my archives and my photos, and there's the poster for it. The year after that, we did Psychobabble at the Fringe, where Trevor played an evil nurse that was incarcerating me, the fading actress, into the insane asylum. And then there's my friend Christopher as Joan Rivers. Here he is as Judy Garland. Here he is as Julie Andrews. Here he is as Liza Minnelli. He'll be doing the show this year at the Fringe. This guy, we're bringing him to this guy's 30th anniversary, so please come and see our Fringe show. He'll be doing a new show called The Broads of Broadway. There he is as Bette Midler. There he is as Liza Minnelli again. There he is as Lucille Ball. There he is again as Lucy. Oh, Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe, oh, look at that. Oh, I hate her sometimes. She's so beautiful in drag. Bette Midler again. He makes all of his own outfits too, by the way. Here's another Guys in Disguise classic. That's Two Queens from Calgary and Twiggy from Edmonton. This is interesting. We used to produce a show called The Loud and Queer Cabaret at Workshop West for 20 years. In fact, we turned it into an anthology book that I have here for sale if you guys are interested. But over the years, I was always on the poster. One year I went, I'm tired of being on the poster. It's not about me. Let's put someone else on the poster. So we went through our archives. This is Millie, Empress 1, Miss Flashback 1, just after she won her first crown. And this is a picture from 1975 or 6 probably. So we decided to put her on the poster. Check out that wig. Doesn't it look like a flying spaceship or something? Wigs in space! Then this is a photo shoot right on Jasper Avenue where that statue of the metal bulb is. That's Binky. Loud and Queer again, there's me in football gear. That's the closest I'll ever get to we're playing sports. Another Loud and Queer poster. Oh, this is my last glamour photo shoot. I wasn't actually on the runway at the municipal airport. We photoshopped me in, just so you know. I still have that dress and that wig. Oh. I don't know what this was for. We ended up using it for one of the Loud and Queer posters. We just thought, it's fall, I have a Catholic schoolgirl shirt and a skirt. I don't feel like doing real drag. Let's do a photo shoot. So, hilariously though, we were too lazy to actually rake up our own leaves. So we just stole leaves from other people's and dumped them on our lawn. Here's us. This is a photo that ended up being on the cover of View Weekly or C Magazine. I can't remember which one. And it's on the steps of the legislature. Oh, there's mine. That's a fake pile of leaves, or a stolen pile of leaves. Here's more shots that we used for the various covers of View Weekly over the years. Yes, that's me standing between two giant penises. Oh, that's one of my earliest photo shoots. Check out the accordion. There's the cover of the book. I'm gonna flip through these quickly. Oh, this is the day I was. This is the day I beat Michael Fair's ass as honorary Lord Mayor of Old Strathcona. You guys remember that? Michael Fair was the mayor. I think he'd been for 2 years in a row. And then they asked me if I wanted to run. I'm like, oh, that sounds like a lot of work. And they went, no, it's fine. You'll have a good time. You don't really have to do anything, and it doesn't really matter if you don't win or whatever. I was like, okay. So Michael Fair decided it was war. And I was actually driving across the low-level bridge, and I heard Michael Fair on the radio going, and when I look down on that bloated beach whale carcass that is Darren Huggan, the Edmonton Queen, you will know that I am the true Queen of Edmonton. I was like, oh, Michael, like, we're friends. So anyway, now the reason that nobody really remembers that I was the honorary Lord, because I whipped Michael's ass that year, just so you know, just for the record. But the reason nobody actually remembers that is because later that night were the riots. It had nothing to do with me, I swear. I swear. Are we almost out of time? It's okay.
I was going to suggest.
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay. What I was going to suggest is that we'll move to questions at this point.
Absolutely.
And then Leslie, where were is there? Oh, there she is. She'll go around with the mic. So put up your arm if you have a question, and then Darren can respond to that.
I'll do my best.
And then we will thank you after a few minutes of questions.
Excellent.
How's that?
Excellent. Thanks for humoring me with my photo show, you guys. So, who has some questions? Oh, there's one right in the middle, of course.
I don't need the mic.
There you go. Good girl. Project.
Where does the term drag queen come from?
I have no idea. There's a lot of debate about that, actually. But the word drag has referred to garb a lot over the times. And Quentin Crisp actually speculates in The Naked Civil Servant that it might have something to do with the way that you drag off of a smoke. I'm not really sure. No one's really sure where the phrase came from, actually. Any other questions, guys? Before we run out of time? You can ask me anything. Seriously, there's never. When I was 19, I could get into drag in about 45 minutes. Now it takes me 3.5 hours. And a team of 2. Because I'm useless. The older I get, the more useless I get. And once I'm in drag, like I can't open doors, I can't light cigarettes, I can't do anything. I'm completely useless. I need an escort. And if I could be carried around by handsome bodybuilders, I would. In fact, when I wear the mermaid tail, that's exactly how I get around. Because it has no feet, right? So. Yes? Because I knew them as both. And that's the interesting thing, is when I started being Gloria Hull in the 80s, 1983 I think is when I got the name, they called me Gloria exclusively for a decade, even though 90% of the time I was dressed as a boy, but I lived as Gloria. And so Gloria manifested herself on stage, but that was my persona in that world. And it's very interesting when I talk about any of my other drag queens, I tend to say she, but I slip sometimes because I also knew them after they stopped doing drag or they became professional actors or something like that. And so then I switch to he. So it's pronouns are really meaningless to drag queens. We sort of were the precursor to the genderless world of brand new pronouns in a way, because we floated back and forth between them as we needed to, right? So it's a good question. Any other questions? Oh, yes.
So, just a quick question. Now that you have made Edmonton a better place to live, and you have opened the windows, and you have brought a lot of creativity, can we get a little promise or a big promise from you that you will stay here because it's more work to be done?
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah. Thank you. That's really sweet. That's really sweet. And I do agree there's more work that needs to be done. And the way I've always looked at, like when I first moved to Edmonton, I was only planning on staying for a minute, and then I was going to go somewhere bigger. But I fell in love in Edmonton. I fell in love with Edmonton, and Edmonton has always created lots of opportunities for me. Good things keep happening to me here. So, and I've also said I'm not moving away from Alberta because Alberta deserves me. I'm a product of this province. I was born here. I was raised here. I'm not leaving. In a pine box, maybe. Yes.
Regarding your costumes, you said one of the girls makes her own. Are there places that will make them, or do you buy them online?
Well, it's interesting because back in the old days, you had to either make them yourself or steal them from another queen, which happened a lot. It's like, oh, she's not looking, I'll just take that. Or we would go to Value Village, because back then we were skinny, junky drag queens who could fit into almost anything. And it didn't matter if it didn't really fit, as long as you could just get it zipped up. But what's happening now is, for instance, as I get older, look, now I make my costumes specifically for the character. So I've got a costume for this show, a costume for this show, you know, that kind of thing. But now there's actually a website called sequinqueen.com. And what you do is you put on all of your padding at home, in the privacy of your own home, your bra, your hip pads, whatever you're gonna wear. You take your measurements, then you go to their website and you scroll through the dresses and you say, I want blue sequins, I want this pattern, I want small sequins, I want backless, I want slit up the side, I want sleeveless on one end, click, order, give them your credit card number, and it shows up in your mail and it fits perfectly. Now those days, back in the old days, it was like literally we would shoplift from Value Village if we had to, like whatever it took. So, and I would wear anything back then. Like nothing was, I was shameless. Well, I loved old vintage brocade sparkly stuff that was just, you know, antique. I love that kind of stuff. So, and a lot of my characters too weren't glamorous. They were waitresses and librarians and, you know, ordinary women. And I loved finding just that perfect little black and yellow Chanel thing from 1972 or 1960 that fit me, you know, that was always so much fun. So, yes. What did I do with my costumes? Well, believe it or not, I actually have a garage in Belgravia that I rent that has all of the Guys in Disguise archives in it. It's ridiculous because 90% of them I don't fit into. But it's good to keep them around because you never know when you're going to need a sparkly dress for something. For instance, the U of A campus, Augustana and Camrose, they hired me to do some drag coaching for a play that they were doing where there was a drag performance in the play, and I had all the dresses that fit the young man that played that role. And then Ross Shepherd got in touch with me just a month ago, and they just finished doing a diversity cabaret because they've got a lot of gender non-conforming people in their class, so they decided to do sort of a rainbow cabaret to celebrate that. And one of the boys in the show was doing a number from Hedwig, so I got to lend this beautiful young man this beautiful purple sequin dress and a long red wig, and then he was doing the number from Hedwig called Wig in a Box. So as the music picked up, we literally brought out, like, because it was a big class of about 30 kids, all 30 kids had a wig on a wig stand, and we did a tornado of wigs around them. So it was the entire Guys in Disguise wig collection. It was awesome. It was one of my favorite drag moments ever. So it's good to keep that stuff around because even if it doesn't fit me, it's valuable fabric. It's, you know, a dress has to fall apart before I'll actually get rid of it. Now, a lot of things I've lost over the years, or they've been stolen, or they just fall apart and rip. You know, you wear them until they wear out, as far as I'm concerned, or until you don't fit into them anymore. Yes, I still have the mermaid tail, just so you know. I would never appear in it in public. It's merciless.
Okay, we had Marnie as a guest the other day.
Oh, Marnie!
On the spectrum of sexual identity, where do you do drag queens and transgender?
It's so different, and yet they're so related. And I'll tell you a little story about Marnie. Marnie used to belong to the Illusion Social Club, which was the transvestites organization of Alberta. So these are straight men who like to do drag. And they started to connect with the drag queen community, which are gay men who like to do drag. And normally, there's not the desire to cross over to the other gender, but that's a case-by-case kind of basis. So what happened was the Illusion Social Club actually hired me to perform at their winter carnival, and I showed up like a drag queen, right? Big wig, jewels, big taffeta dress. My husband was with me in a tuxedo, because that's what you do when you go out with your husband in drag. And we walked in, and the entire restaurant was full of men in drag and their wives. And they were not dressed the same way I was. They were dressed in very calm hair, bone, linen, gray, little pearls instead of rhinestones. It was much more about passing and about being feminine than it was about drawing attention to yourself, right? So I learned a lot that night. And one of the people I met that night was Marnie, and it was her first night dressed up ever. And she was beautiful, and I loved her spirit. But a great little story about Marnie. She might have told you this already, so pardon me if I repeat it. But she ran for sort of the Empress of the Illusions Girls, and decided she wanted more of that. So then she wanted to run for the Imperial Crown Princess of the Imperial Sovereign Court of the Wild Rose. And the drag queens went, wait a minute, you're a straight guy. Like, how does that work? This is a gay organization for drag queens. And there was a lot of drag queens that had to face their own heterophobia and their own xenophobia. Seriously, because it's like, well, why would you want to be part of this group? Like, this is for us to find ourselves. Anyway, they eventually relented. Marnie Gras became Imperial Crown Princess, did a kick-ass job. The next year, she decided to run for Empress and won. So that was 10 years ago, and she became the first heterosexual Empress of Edmonton, the first transvestite Empress of Edmonton. And then a few years later, she transitioned, and now she's a woman. So it's a fascinating story that she's been through. Like, her journey is fascinating. I want to turn it into a TV movie at some point. It's so good. It's so good. And she's also one of the ones who is the most well-adjusted through that change as well. So, how are we doing? Thank you, guys. Feel free to come up and look at posters and stuff as I pack up. Yeah. I also have books for sale if you're interested. That was fun. This is a